Let's face it, web-based training can be pretty awful. And a lot of times when somebody in the company says, we'll just do a webinar, my response is, ugh, boring. Web-based, virtual-based training, online training can be horrifically boring if you're not being careful. Here are some tips from No Boring Training that's going to allow you to make your online training a lot more interesting. Be very cognizant of how often you take breaks. Typically about an hour, hour and a half of instruction, you need to take a break. Even a few minutes is enough to allow people to mentally reset. It's very challenging to stare at that computer screen for hours on end and stay engaged and stay active. So give plenty of breaks on a consistent schedule. All of the video conferencing platforms have the ability to do breakout sessions, breakout rooms. Utilize those for sure. That's a great way to kind of break up the session, add a little bit of interest, and if you structure it right with a game, an activity, a guided discussion, your breakout sessions allow your participants to participate, which makes the session far more interesting. Another great technique to keep people from dozing off is to ask questions. Every so often, every few minutes or so, you should be posing some sort of question to the group. It could be a knowledge-based question. It could be asking them to apply some of the information, recall some of the information, maybe sort of creatively take bits and pieces of information and put it all together. However you go about interjecting those questions, every couple minutes or so, have a question for the group. This stops you from talking, but it also encourages, guides, forces your participants to start to engage their active brain because they know a question is coming. It's been 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, he hasn't asked a question, and now their brains are staying a little bit more engaged. Lean heavily into group discussions and activities is a way to break up your sessions and prevent you from just doing an hour-long webinar. If you want to keep your session more interesting, remember this. You need to take your energy level even higher. Even higher than you normally would in a face-to-face discussion. Your gestures need to be bigger, your volume, your emphasis needs to be stronger, your energy level needs to be higher to translate through this digital medium. Your energy level will be the bar. Your energy level will be the peak of what the group does. If you come into the session, today we're going to learn about reverse disqualification, you are never going to get any sort of engagement, interest, no sort of involvement from your participants. Some other great ideas: anytime a pet comes into view of the camera, stop the session just briefly, have the person introduce their pet. Now, obviously, you can't do this every 5 seconds and you need to stay on track, but those little quick breaks give a little bit of mental refresher to your participants. Incorporate flash polls. Now, you can do this related to the subject matter you're discussing, or you can do something maybe off topic, off beat, a little left field, just as a way to kind of break up the session. I like to use these at kind of a low point, typically in the afternoon, typically when you've been in a long, day-long type session. When there's a reasonable stopping point, I might ask the group, what's your favorite music? What's the best place you've ever traveled to? What's your favorite type of food? Something like that. But you can also structure it around the material that you've covered. What's the most interesting thing you've learned so far? You could even go one step further and set these up in electronic format using online forms, online survey taking tools, and quickly pop that into the chat feed and have people answer. It's a great technique. Spice up your session. Physical movement is important. Encourage your participants to move. Now, you can either give them permission to move at the beginning of the session or literally schedule times into your session. Okay, everybody, turn your cameras off, stand up, move around, or maybe keep your cameras on. It just really depends on the group and how appropriate that might be. But get up, move around, stretch. We're going to do some jumping jacks. We're going to do some push-ups, whatever. Something to just physically move around. Video is another great way to add interest to a long online training session. Now, it seems a bit counterintuitive. You're already on video and you're going to show them another video. But you can take a minute-long clip of something, have the participants watch that, maybe incorporate that in a breakout session or a group discussion where you have the entire group together, watch the clip, discuss it with some very specific guided questions that lead you back to the session objective. Great way to kind of quickly spice things up. You can do GIFs, have them sort of pre-planned and share them in the chat feed to emphasize a particular point. You can also use your internal videos, your internal training videos. Now, instead of playing a 7-minute video, which is just going to bore everyone to death, you can play clips of that video and then use that as a springboard to ask questions, to have your participants apply the information that's being discussed in the video. Ask for their feedback. What are your thoughts on this? Has there ever been a time you've experienced a scenario like this? Have you ever utilized a technique like this, and how did it work? So you can use that video is a way to kind of, number one, stop you talking, but number two, kind of guide and spice up and amp up the discussion a little bit. So there's a whole boatload of different ways that you can spice up your online training. The next time somebody says, we're going to do a 3-hour-long webinar, have them check out No Boring Training, because that's not going to be an effective session. Try some of these techniques, and I think you'll find your participants will not only be more interested and engaged, you'll have a far more effective outcome from your session. Let me know your thoughts. Leave me a comment down below. What's your favorite technique to spice up an online training session?